We are relaxing. It's summer season, but the seasons have changed. And what else are we doing? We are actually we are actually also preparing for Christmas Day, right? So we have plated out here. We're gonna take the plates out next week, and we're gonna do our eyelashes probably properly because we've really now. I'm not gonna do a lot ourselves that are different. What else are we doing? We are gonna do our red dress this year for Christmas. We are gonna do our green dress photo, maybe not the greens who stole Christmas, but our green dress photo, and then we are also going to do our red dress photo, and hopefully a mother-daughter Christmas photo, right? During this season, we are enjoying. It's very calm where we are at, very calm, and we're actually enjoying the calmness in this Christmas season, right? The calmness, we're celebrating the calmness with this season. Remember, we had a busy year with people of color. We had a busy podcast year. We had an amazing podcast year. Amazing opinion. I always say our opinion are required, but information sharing is important in our generation. Why? Because there's a lot happening in our generation. So I believe in information sharing. And I believe that when things that happens in the world can affect us where we find ourselves at in our countries, we have a duty to ourselves, that is to share information that are fine for us in our seasons. Sometimes people want to overpower our seasons, but we have a duty to present ourselves, and our AWOKH people of color discussion have been that our representation of ourselves are of utmost importance. Our duty to protect ourselves are of utmost importance. How we protect ourselves with our AWOKH fashion is we educate a generation of people to be fine no matter what you are wearing in season. To educate the men in our generation to not abuse the woman because of a different dress code that some men grew up with in their families with parenting. We educate direct and firmly that everything in our generation are acceptable, but with having to respond to our seasons is that we present ourselves in our seasons. We educate that with what we do, we are not arrogant, but we are also not going to be oppressed out. We are not going to be silenced out, and we are not going to be abused out of a generation of people who want to create the room on earth for themselves. We are going to have an interesting podcast next year. I've recorded a few podcasts this week that we are going to share next year that has got to do with how we're moving forward as a generation in leadership, what we require of our leaders in our seasons, and not necessarily what we require, but how are we going to respond to what all the people find themselves working on. I'm preparing that there's a lot of people that finds themselves working on projects that has got to do with designing the earth for a certain type of person to have an advantage above the other person. A lot of processes on earth has got to do with people working on advancing means to us in the context of being more privileged than the other. And we have a generation of leaders that constantly work on not a third world process and a first world process. They work on one type of person amongst humanity that are more privileged than the other. And that's where AWOKH Business were starting at, to say that I am not going to work for a business manager who's working and having me be the employee, but I own my opinion in the office. And my office has become my AWOKH Business. It has become everything that I educate with AWOKH Business. Everything that we are creating office, and we are constantly structuring office. And with structuring office, we everything that we do are business, everything that humanity do are business, and everything that AWOKH does on social media are business to AWOKH Business, to me, Ribea, Elise. And therefore office structure requires firm education, and that's where we're going to be on next year with podcasting and with our live stream videos. We're going to share information that some people call it relevant, Ribea, Elise, of utmost importance. We are going to educate on our terminologies, yes, the ways we have a presentation for New Zealand newsroom that we require the news readers, when they relay information to the viewers, to relay it in a way that the viewers exactly can listen to what the news reader are explaining, when we have to deal with so much on earth. Remember, this year we were focusing on our different languages, our different traditional backgrounds, different ways of listening, and therefore the much is happening on earth, and much requires a response, and much poverty circumstances require us to really address that. And that is why we are going to be firm and indirect, because we had during this week a moment where the newsreader was relaying some information, and while they were relaying information, I did not know what they were talking about, right? And it has had to do so much with, I think, the oil prices. Something about it was not necessarily the oil or the gas, but something about not the prices of that, the effect that it has on the environment itself. But during the relay of the information, they spoke about two aspects. One was the economy itself, one was economically, the effect that it might have on the economy, and the terminology therefore was an economy terminology, right? And environmental friendly terminology. Remember, we learned in secondary school about the mathematics ways of speaking, scientific ways of speaking. We didn't learn it necessarily, but being in the economic class, being in the biology class, not attending the science class for a reason, not attending the mathematics class for a reason, because we're going to listen differently. And every one of us play a part of where we are at, and what and how the earth are being structured and restructured. So with the newsreader related information, I didn't know what they were talking about, and they had to use economic terms in what they were saying, and they tried to explain it in a scientific way. And when the newsreader were finished with explaining it, it had to do with so much that can affect the wars that are happening in countries. So next year we're going to, on podcast, also be educating on the requirement to abide to that we learned in school, that our language differences requires us to speak in ways that are not abusive to the viewer and to the audience in general. Having to grow up in a country where there's different people from with different languages, African languages, we had to learn to speak a language that is a one house language, right? Remember, we educated about the one house approach. And with next year, with our podcast, we want to focus on what is going to be our one house language. They have used a lot of languages this year that has got to do with ISA business languages. There is sustainability, transparency, and they constantly used it, and I was constantly aggressed because of the context in how they used the words. They were using it to address the viewer, because they knew that AWOKH Business are educating in season. ISA Business uses the words sustainability, transparency in everything they're saying. And you can't just manipulate the viewer. You have to explain it in words that the viewer would know exactly the context of everything. They would not say the complete sentence, but they would say sustainability, the word. And then the viewer don't know halfway what the newsreader is saying. So we're going to speak about that and educate about that also a lot on our podcast next year, because we want our newsroom people and our television entertainment people to not aggress the viewers, right? Because our viewers are speaking different languages, and we listen differently, and we all play a part in what happens in countries. And therefore we want our news readers to work with us and to not give us a word like transparency when they can explain the few sentence of what they're actually saying, and the arrogance of using those words, you know, the sensitivity of the season that our generation are in, and the arrogance of how they relate the news to us is what we're going to educate on next year. Other than that, what are we wearing today? We're wearing our yellow dress. We're wearing a different yellow dress with our booties, yes. And it's a nice weather. So everyone have an amazing Christmas season and enjoy Christmas with family and friends. And please like on our videos. Thank you for continuing to follow us. Continue to listen to our podcast. Thank you for joining our rooms, and please like on all of our videos. Have an amazing season with us.